just for him to be down there, I'm like, wow, man, because I'm with you. I think that he should have been higher. Schilling, I made the argument the other day. I didn't think he had a chance at all, now, but I'm like, hey, he was a bulldog in the postseason, which I think you've got to escalate the value of that a little bit there too, man. So, and I'm shocked that he sits as low as he does too. I did have Tim Raines, as you did. I said, man, that's one of the best leadoff hitters of all time. One of, he's right there with Rickey Henderson, and maybe he was overshadowed a lot because they were playing in the same era, obviously, and different spotlights there. But those are also guys I'd make arguments for. I'm with you on Lee Smith for sure. And then you got the Edgar Martinez argument that people can make left and right, and that'll be interesting as we keep evolving into an era of more full-time DHs, and that's now a thing,
Yeah, and I think I think Edgar Martinez is a guy that maybe falls in the same category as Lee Smith. I'm not 100% sure that it's his fault that that's the role that he filled, and I'm not sure how we can just decide that some role that is pretty integral in our game that you just can't be a Hall of Famer at that. I mean, how can you not be a Hall of Fame closer? I mean, with the exception of being like Mariano Rivera, how does that pretty much not exist? And I would say the same thing as designated hitter. I'll be interested because I think suddenly the rules will change when David Ortiz becomes eligible, and and that in some ways to me goes back to some of that media bias. He's in a big market. He certainly played in some big games and had a major impact in the postseason, and I think that helps, and I think it should help. So I think David Ortiz has a lot going for him, but he's also been a DH pretty much his whole life, and he's also had some PED speculation around him, and those are things that Edgar Martinez never had to. And I'm with you. I think he deserves to be in more consideration than what he is. And I think Tim Raines, I agree with everything you said. Tim Raines was the second best leadoff hitter in the 1980s, and if the only guy that's better than you is the greatest of all time when it comes to leadoff hitters, I think that should still qualify you to be a Hall of Famer. That's a pretty harsh penalty, I guess, for finishing second place to not be a Hall of Famer. But Tim Raines, an 8-time All-Star, and I mean, really kind of dominated the National League as a leadoff hitter. And part of me wonders about biases and how things are affected, and I wonder how much it hurts him that he played in Montreal and out of the U.S. in really the best years of his career.
Absolutely, man. And then don't even get me started on leadoff hitters that don't get the votes. Kenny Lofton, as we know, unable to be on the ballot anymore. Like you brought up Albert Belle. What did he get? Less than 8% when he was on there the first time. I mean, that amazes me, man. But Lofton, I think it's a shame. I'm not saying Kenny Lofton's a Hall of Famer or anything like that. When we start talking about Tim Raines, then I get a little antsy because I want to bring up Kenny Lofton, man. But I do think that it's a shame how on the low end he ended up when he went up on the ballot because I'm not saying he's a Hall of Famer, but he should be up in these conversations a bit,
Well, I agree, and I think again, Kenny Lofton, he was the best leadoff hitter of the 1990s, and I'm not even sure how you make an argument for anyone else to even contend with him. And I don't think that's a Cleveland bias or an Indian bias in any way. I mean, I clearly think he was the best leadoff hitter of the 1990s, and how, again, like you said, how he's not even on the ballot, I think is kind of a joke. And I mean, I was kind of disappointed when they made the rule last year that you would only be on the ballot for 10 years instead of 15. They made it harder to get into the Hall of Fame, and right now, while they have a backlog of players and even some of these guys we're talking about that aren't on the ballot anymore, I would not necessarily make it easier, but I think they always talk about, some kind of reform to the ballot or who's eligible to vote and things like that. I would like to see them get away from the 10-player limit because I think that would open things up for some other guys to maybe generate some more votes.
Oh, absolutely. That was kind of what I was mentioning earlier, man. I didn't understand, again, how Kenny Lofton finished as low as he did, where he was dropped off the ballot that way. I could see him being in the bottom of this. He finishes in the 20% area every year, and he's a guy that people talk about and then move on from, man. But to drop off the ballot like that just surprises me. Meanwhile, you got everybody's trying to prove a point with the steroid guys. They just hang on the ballot, which, by the way, is also just wasting time. They sit there. Nobody, the same 30 whatever percent of the people are going to vote for Bonds, Clemens, etc. The same 5, 6, 7% are going to vote for Sammy Sosa. How long do those log jams sit there as well? Because nobody's putting those guys in, nobody's dropping them off. They just hang there, same spot every time. No more than 40% of people voting them in. What do you do there? I mean, do those guys ever get in? You mentioned, Clemens. 300 and whatever wins. Do those guys ever move, or do they just sit here forever getting 37.6% of the ballot or whatever?
I don't. To answer the first part of your question, I don't think they'll ever get in, because, and I hear voters every year say, I didn't vote for them, and right now I'm not going to, but I reserve the right to change my mind. And I think that's fair. I think certainly they have the numbers, and certainly they also have all the speculation that goes with it. So I guess they deserve to, hang in purgatory for 10 years. But in the same breath, I don't think they're ever getting in. I always look at the Hall of Fame vote each year as, who would I vote for and why? And there's been years where we participate in online Hall of Fame votes, and when we've posted our ballot kind of as an act of transparency and to kind of create some dialogue on our site. But every year that I do it, I kind of always think too, would I vote for these guys if I had a Hall of Fame ballot? And my answer is always no. And I guess, I certainly don't have a Hall of Fame ballot, but I guess I think about it each year, and would I? And, unless something changes drastically, and I don't know what that would be, I don't see where that number is going to move. Because like you said, they're getting the same 35 to 37% as they got last year and the year before, and that's not changing. So essentially, 2/3 of the people out there don't think that they deserve to be Hall of Famers. And frankly, I was watching MLB Network before the vote, and I don't think it was that day. I think it was a couple days before. And Cliff Floyd was someone who I thought made a great point, and he said, they made that choice, and they reaped the benefits in many, many ways. And so, if they've won many awards they already didn't deserve by way of MVPs and Cy Youngs and All-Star games, and don't even talk about the money that was made from contracts and extensions. And he said, they wanted accolades, and they've won many. And so if they don't get maybe the most ultimate award in their game, they have no one to blame but themselves. And I hear people make the argument that Clemens and Bonds would have been Hall of Famers anyways. Then my answer to that is, then don't do it. Don't tarnish your own record. Don't.
Right,
cheating
absolutely.
at your job,
I'm
no matter what you do. If you're good at your job and then you cheat, and saying, "Well, I was good anyways," doesn't make it okay. You'd still be punished. You'd still be reprimanded. So, to me, that makes it all the more foolish that they were Hall of Famers and tarnished their own legacy.
Absolutely. I agree with you there. You pay the consequences. You've already reaped some rewards. One thing, too, maybe you would know this. Has there ever been like an informal polling or anything? Or if not, I'm curious, what would you think? Seeing as those guys, especially looking at Bonds and Clemens as the main two and the percentage that they get, has there ever been an informal polling, or what do you think if Pete Rose was on the ballot and people were doing the same thing as they do with those guys. I'm just curious, would Charlie Hustle get more than 37% of the vote, even with what he did, or would he get less? I'm curious if voters would look less or more harshly against what Pete Rose did than against the people that cheated the game, actually. I'm curious. But do you know, has there ever been like an informal polling of the voters or anything?
Not that I'm aware of. That's a good question. I might coldly Google search that for a while sometime soon. But, just my guess off the top of my head is I think if you threw Pete Rose on the ballot today, I think he would get more of the vote than Clemens or Bonds, but I don't think he'd get enough. Something tells me he'd be right around 50%. And I also think that he would be a guy that the needle would never move, because I think at this point, how you feel about Pete Rose, nothing's going to change. I don't see where most writers he's been banned from the game for over 25 years now, I believe.
Yeah, since we were kids, man.
What's that?
Since we were kids, man.
Yeah. And I think I'm probably in the minority of. I think the average fan says put Pete Rose in, and I guess I always think in my head, if you wouldn't vote for Barry Bonds and you wouldn't vote for Roger Clemens, I wouldn't vote for Pete Rose either, and I wouldn't vote for Joe Jackson. I wouldn't vote for guys that are banned, that have tarnished the game, that have questioned its validity, and that's really what all of those guys have done in one way or another. And I hate the argument that people make, well, Pete Rose only bet on the Reds to win. Well, unless you bet on them to win every day, then every day you don't bet on them to win, to me, is a vote of a lack of confidence in your ability to win that day. And that is almost, to my eyes, that's admitting that you don't believe your team's going to win. And that's teetering very closely on the line of fixing games. And, we'll never know when Pete Rose was betting on the Reds. How did he use relief pitchers? How did he use guys? Did he hold a guy back in a 5-2 game that they were behind in the 8th inning that maybe he would have brought in because he thought, well, I'll hang on to him till tomorrow when the starting pitchers, for the other team isn't nearly as good, and I've got a chance to win that game and win that bet. And, you just don't know. Was he managing the Reds the best of his ability, or was he managing his bookie to the best of his ability when he did and didn't bet on the Reds? And so, personally, for me, I wouldn't vote for him, but I know people would.
You just gave me a couple of things real quick. Number one, I'm with you as far as most of what you just said. I would have him on the ballot just like these guys, or else I would have them off the ballot either. I say let people make the same discussion that we just had, just like you hold the steroids against those guys. Let them vote. Let them decide how close he gets, and if he sits in purgatory forever, then that's the price. But at least then, you put it up to the vote. But I'm with you on that. You just gave me an idea. I don't know if anybody's ever done it, but it would be a hell of a research thing. People like to sit down and do these things nowadays, and you may even be able to get a government grant to do this. But it would be interesting with all the public records that are out there and documents that can be found nowadays, if you could piece together pieces of evidence and different betting slips, different things that are known quantities from the investigations back then, and anything that may be able to verify certain days and certain days of the week what and who Pete Rose did or didn't bet on. I'm not saying all of them, but the stuff that you could verify, and then go back to those games and literally inning by inning look through the decisions, like you said, the pitching changes, and see if anybody could ever piece together an argument one way or the other to verify exactly what you just said, that you're playing with fire when you're making. That just seems like an interesting. People go into sabermetrics, and people spend a year to put together a project to tell you how many curveballs the Cleveland Indians swung at on 3-2 counts in the 9th inning. So you got to think somebody could piece together some research and at least maybe put a rudimentary report together along those lines if there's anything that leads you to believe that he did